Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm going to start with just some administrative announcements. So the event is recorded, so please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. It also may help with any background noise that may be happening in your particular environment. Please turn on your video and have your full name showing so our presenters can see their audience. I'm going to be giving some rules of engagement for the panel program, and I'll explain that a little bit later as we get closer to the panel program. And then to help facilitate connections, provide your name and point of contact information in the public chat channel. Include what you offer or seek from the community. The chat will be saved before the end of the meeting. I'll clean it up of any superfluous conversation, and that will be shared with all attendees in an email tomorrow. Everyone who is not able to attend in tonight's event but registered will receive a link to the recording along with everyone who attended. That'll be in a few days. It'll be early next week when you receive that. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and have David start up the slides, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Emma Toops. I'm the Executive Director of American Warriors and facilitator for the Purple Connection. This event is hosted and sponsored by Toops Consulting, LLC. David and I are connectors, coaches, and consultants in Toops Consulting, and we thank you for being here. Especially welcome to those who this is your first Purple Connection event. For our new attendees, thank the person who invited you because they felt that you would benefit or be able to contribute by being part of this community. And to our regulars, it's good to see you again. Next slide. This is the event agenda. I'm doing the welcome right now. I'll be doing a little bit of an introduction to American Warriors and the Purple Connection. Then we'll go into the educational networking program where we have our panel presenters. And then we'll have some Q&A, a transition tips presenter, and then ways to get involved, and then a lineup for next month and wrap up of the meeting. Next slide. All right, first is an introduction. American Warriors is a special interest group of the ACA Business Club, which is a private club with the philosophy that business flows out of relationships. People do business with people that they know, like, and trust. Therefore, the members of the club are committed to creating solid connections by learning and practicing the fundamentals of strategic networking and relationship building. American Warriors are club members who have an affinity with or support those who have served our country in military or public service. The mission statement for American Warriors is to provide educational and networking opportunities to veterans who are now leaders in business and support the transition of active duty service members into private and public sector business. The Purple Connection is one vehicle that American Warriors use to fulfill its mission. Next slide. The challenges of transitioning from the military is a very well-researched problem. It's evident by the multitude of military support nonprofits and community organizations that provide services to address them. Driving Community Impact was a white paper published in April of 2015 by the IVMF of Syracuse University. They determined in their research, several years of research and thousands of surveys, that the leading gap in services was not the lack of services and support, but the connectedness of the services and support. Very often, transitioning military feel a loss of purpose. They feel isolated or misunderstood, or they feel overwhelmed for their need of help, but are disconnected or lack affinity to the people and culture of their new environment. Next slide. So how do you solve it? You create a partnership of stakeholders informed by a common goal for supporting American Warriors. The Purple Connection is a community of partnered stakeholders with a common focus of service, support, and care so that we can effectively address the challenges of transition. Next slide. So what's up with the name? There's actually two reasons for it. In government jargon, the color for joint is purple. When our military is operating overseas on a deployment, that environment is comprised of a multitude of seemingly disparate entities with differing purposes, but they have a common purpose through the operation that unites and focuses their effort. TPC is an attempt to replicate this type of joint environment to support the American warrior in transition. Another reason for the name is that when you combine the colors of red and blue, you get purple. So in the purple connection, we're facilitating the connection of individuals who identify more closely to either the military community or the military support and business community. And when they come together, it is a purple connection. Next slide. Here are the vision and mission of the Purple Connection. We create awareness to enable access and then empower action through collaboration and encouragement to expedite reintegration, support growth and healing, and enable opportunities. We do this by regularly bringing together community experts and facilitating connections through educational networking. Next slide. So here are the rules of engagement for our panel program and our networking. Each participant will have 8 minutes to deliver their remarks. I will be keeping a timer. The time can be stopped short and given back for specific Q&A to the individual or used up entirely by the panelist. However, when the time goes off, please wrap up and we'll move on to the next presenter. Once each panelist has spoken, there'll be 15 minutes for Q&A with the TPC community. If you're uncomfortable with public speaking or want to remain anonymous with your question, you can private chat your question to me and I will ask it for you. Please be succinct in your questions and direct them to a specific panelist or to the community if it is a more general question. If you have a complicated question, you may ask to discover if there is a subject matter expert in the audience, but if a response would take longer than 2 minutes to address it, then I would recommend that follow-up be done after the event. After the Q&A, there will be 8 minutes for our transition tip speaker, who will provide an educational presentation for paradigm or process shifts or resources that apply to transition. After the presentations, if you haven't already, share in the public chat or point of contact information and how you serve or need help from the community. The chat will be saved and all attendees will get a cleaned up copy in a future email so you can follow up with each other as you like. I will do event announcements and then wrap up the event. Next slide. All right, so first up in our panel program is our veteran entrepreneur. Colonel Bob Ulin retired from the United States Army after service in Vietnam and the Cold War. He has authored several books related to his military and business experience, as well as being the founder of several nonprofits since retiring from the military. All right, so Bob, I see that you are here. Let me set my timer and then we will let you get going with your remarks.
All right, well, thank you, Emma, and hello, everybody. Pleasure for me to be here. I sent out a note saying that my current job is I'm helping the Command General Staff College Foundation, a foundation that I helped establish, oh gosh, 15 years ago, I guess it was, and I ran it for 7.5 years. And my wife got tired of me hanging around the house, so now I'm doing some part-time work for the foundation, usually in the area of development. I've got about 20 years experience of development. That is, I raise money. And not only here in the Kansas City area, but throughout the United States. We've been pretty successful at that. In fact, when I was with the foundation, we raised $13 million in 7 years, from 0 to 13 million. And it was really an interesting challenge. But that's not the purpose of this discussion. On the transition side, I did run another organization called the Center for Transitional Leadership for 6 years. And I would work with individuals primarily on Fort Leavenworth who were retiring from the military and looking to find executive level jobs in the private sector. We had about 300 people that went through our program in the 6-year period. And 14 of them became vice presidents and C-level executives of companies in primarily Kansas City. But we did have 2 of our guys found executive level jobs in the St. Louis area. I wrote 2 books on transitions during that process. The most recent one is this one here, Transitions 2.0. And it was focused on helping military professionals make that transition. And there is a huge, I can tell you right now, as a retired military officer and a retired business executive, there is a big difference between the 2 worlds. And I'm sure most of you know that. Onto the subject, though, the book that I wrote, my personal memoir, I think that writing your personal history is a real cathartic experience. I know that I'm a genealogist. I've got about 4,000 names in a database. I was fascinated by some of the things that I found out about my ancestors. And my grandchildren encouraged me to write my story. And so I kicked the can down the road, like most of us. It's kind of hard to get started. Kicked the can down the road until I had some medical procedures that forced me to stay at home for a while. And so rather than get in my wife's way, I went down into the basement here and sat down at the computer. And over a period of 14 days, I knocked out 120 pages. Put it away for probably 2 or 3 months, came back to it. It was absolutely terrible. It was just a whole bunch of stuff thrown into a pot. And then I started going back through some of my notes. And I guess you're not supposed to keep notes in combat, but I did, in little green books, if you will. And I went back through the notes and started to put some order into the chaos of my experiences that I put on paper, and ended up writing that book. And I didn't write it as a commercial enterprise, and it's a good thing I didn't, because it didn't actually sell that well. I wrote it for the family, to leave my history for the family. However, several hundred copies have been sold by people that were interested. Those of you that served during the Cold War period, like I did primarily, I was a private in Germany when the Berlin Wall went up. I was a colonel at NATO headquarters when it came down. So I lived throughout that whole period, and then 2.5 years in Vietnam during that period as well. And so what I didn't realize is nobody's writing those kinds of histories anymore. And so by putting that together, it kind of helped me to identify some of the things that I did. And it was a tremendous learning experience. I never questioned why we were in Vietnam. I was just working hard to survive and make sure that I could accomplish my mission and bring everybody home. And I found out an awful lot about that war through the work that I did. And then later in my career, I ended up in Europe at high-level headquarters. I was a diplomat in the American embassy in Brussels. I had a diplomatic mission for about 3 years, I think it was. Served at NATO headquarters and Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers Europe. I spent 9 years in Belgium, over 3 different assignments, and did some very interesting negotiations on the reduction of armed forces in Europe. And so that played into it. So anyhow, that was my story. And I am currently, like I said, supporting Command General Staff College Foundation. And we're going to have a conference in November of this year to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Soviet Union. and the end of the Cold War, basically. And what did we do? How did we do it? I've got some very interesting speakers lined up, people that were kind of in the fray. I know that I led a mission to Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary after the fall of the wall, where we met with prime ministers and members of parliament. And they all asked the questions, okay, now that the Soviets are gone, what are we going to do? And it kind of reminded me of what it must have been like at the American Revolution when the Americans ran the British off and then sat around and said, okay, guys, now it's ours. How are we going to organize this thing? What are we going to do? And so we lived through that very interesting period. And of course, that was 30 years ago. And so this is going to be kind of a retrospective to kind of look back and figure out how we can do that. With respect to transition, if any of you have any questions for me afterwards, or if you want to contact me, I still dabble in a little bit. I don't do it as a business anymore, but I do help people network and try to find kind of help them make that transition and understand the cultural differences between the military and the private sector and what it takes to be successful. How am I doing on time, Emma?
You are inside of 1 minute left.
Oh, okay.
So right on the nose as far
All
as time management. Good job, Bob.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, we will go ahead and bring up our next presenter. All right. Our next presenter is our military support nonprofit. Commander Cindy McDermott retired from the U.S. Navy Reserves after 21 years as a public affairs officer. She's authored a fiction series called Working with Really Stupid People and is a regular contributing writer to Her Life magazine. She's also the advisor for the Kansas City Veterans Writing Team. She joins us tonight with no video because of a dysfunctional computer camera, but I know that her audio is working. I was chatting with her a little bit earlier. So Cindy, are you there?
I am, Emma. Can you hear
me? Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me back. It's been several years since I spoke to the Purple Connection about our writing workshops, and we have some new things that we've added that I'd like to share with the group, and hopefully I can stay within my 8-minute time frame as well. But you know, if Bob wants to donate his time to me, I'm sure I could probably use it. But first of all, when we talk about writing, especially for veterans, and not just for veterans, but since this is a veterans group, I want to talk about the fact that writing can have an important impact, a positive impact on our mental health. And it can be recognized by mental health professionals as having a positive impact on our mental health. Many times they will call upon the creative arts, especially writing, as part of a healing process. And so it can be as complex as writing about a traumatic experience, but you should be working with a mental health professional if you are doing that. And many times military veterans have suffered traumatic experiences, or it can be just as simple as reflecting on the day. What are the blessings that you've had during your day? So there is a wide range of opportunities to write. So for our group, the Kansas City Veterans Writing Team, we are focused on not only helping veterans negotiate their pathway of recovery, but also inviting other veterans who may not have those kinds of invisible wounds of war to perhaps have an opportunity to learn how to tell their own story. So the mission of our team is to give past or present military or their family members, and I think that's really important that family members are included in that group. And we want to give them the tools and confidence to develop their stories in a safe, non-judgmental space. Very important that it is non-judgmental. So we cover the basics, and then we use writing exercises to practice what we've just learned. And then we share those on a voluntary basis. No one is ever forced to share their work, but on a voluntary basis, we will critique as a group to help with improving the writing that they've just done. We have been operating for 8 years now, and this is our 7th year of hosting writing workshops. And we guesstimate that we've helped over 2,000 veterans and family members by attending our day-long workshops in the spring. And then we have multi-week workshops that we do in the fall, and they are free. We always like to hear that word. They're free, because we have been very blessed by the fact that there have been a number of organizations who have underwritten the grants that we have been awarded, and then also we are blessed by the fundraising that we're able to do from individuals. We operate under the nonprofit Moral Injury Association of America. So when you're in these workshops, you will explore approaches to writing your personal story. You could write poetry, you could write fiction, you could write memoir, and then there is definitely a focus on self-revision. How do you improve your writing? Each session is facilitated by high-level, very successful writers and educators, many times college-level educators, although you don't have to be a college student to join us at our workshops. And then we do on occasion have manuscript review opportunities available to you as well. So it's not all writing. In 2019, we actually moved out into doing some new creative expression called mapping. So it was a piece of artwork that we created. Each vet created this piece of artwork, which was actually what we called a mapping collage. And so during the time they were in the multi-week workshop in the fall, we encouraged them to write on a piece of poetry or a piece of prose, and then continue to hone that and improve that each week based on the new learnings that they were experiencing. And then they took that piece of poetry or prose and then transferred it into what we call a mapping collage. So basically it was a collage that they put down on an 8.5 by 11 board. We were able to display these at Studio Ink Gallery in the Crossroads along with their writing, and it was viewed by more than 600 people during the month of November in 2019. We've hosted veteran readers theater the past few years at the Plaza Library Auditorium, and that's usually held in the fall. And the vets would work on their writing and then present it in front of a public group, voluntary basis. We would actually script it out, and it really turned out to be quite successful, and the vets that participated enjoyed doing so. We probably had several hundred people attend those readers theaters as well. And many of the graduates of the workshops are participating in monthly critique sessions that we hold. It's very informal, but it is in a structured kinds of critique groups. We have guidelines that we follow and so on and so forth. So what that is that you write anything you want, 500 words. We email that out to the team ahead of time, and then we gather back together in person. We're going to start again. And then as a group, you will offer critique on that particular piece of writing. And that is really, really a very popular part of our program. Normally, we ask that you attend a workshop first before taking that step. So if you want to learn more about the Kansas City Veterans Writing Team, you can visit our Facebook page at KC Vets Writing. And you'll be able to catch up on everything that we're doing. The next thing that we will have will be the fall workshops, and normally those are held in October. So some other things besides the Vets Writing Team that you could participate in if you would like to get your writing out there now. I would highly recommend submitting a story or poem to Veterans Voices, which is actually headquartered right here in Kansas City. It's a quarterly magazine that features nothing but veteran writing. And there's actually a website for them, and there's online guidelines that you can follow to be able to submit your work. And in the past, you actually could win some prizes if you were selected. So that is a very good tool to use if you're looking for something like that. Missouri Humanities Council offers virtual writing sessions for veterans several times a year. So visit the website to learn more about that. I would say talk with your local libraries about potential critique groups that you might join if you'd like to hone your writing skills. In the fall, Johnson County Library hosts a fall writing workshop. It's phenomenal. It's several days, like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's free and it's very, very good. I would highly recommend attending that. Mid-Continent Story Center offers a romance writers workshop. If you're not in the romance, that's okay, because everything they present can be translated to any type of writing. It's very, very good. I would go to that one. And that's
Cindy, your time has gone.
Oh, okay. I got two more things. How about that?
Okay.
All right.
Wrap up, please.
Now, Bob was going to give me his time. So the Kansas City Library hosts writing events. The Writer's Place is a nonprofit that offers courses that you can take. Sign up for a writing course at a local college. But the most important thing, if you're looking to get into writing, is read, and write.
All right. Thank you so much, Cindy. Lots of great information about things that are happening now, as well as things coming up. We actually, thank you for mentioning Veterans Voices. We had Diane Mitchell as a presenter a few months ago, and she talked about that organization.
Great.
All right. Very good. Our next presenter is our military-friendly company. Elaine Symanski is a military spouse to a retired career officer. Her son currently serves in the U.S. Army Reserves as a battalion commander. Elaine is the CEO of her own company, ESymanski Communications, where she is a writer and editor. Elaine, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, you are up.
First of all, I love that this entire session is about writing, because I have my own writing, editing, and consulting business. I cleverly named ESymanski Communications because I couldn't think of anything better. And I have a background in journalism. I started as a reporter on a daily newspaper where I quickly learned to write on deadline and to just handle whatever was coming at me, because saying no to an assignment was never an option. So I learned to be versatile. I then went to the business side of publishing as chief editor of a monthly magazine and a web content developer. After that, I went more to the corporate side as a multimedia writer-producer for Sprint. I worked in the training department and developed interactive media, including video. I actually started my communications business kind of by accident while I was working at Sprint. A manager that I had worked with and who we got along great with and had a great respect for left to start her own training company. And she asked me very quickly if I would develop some scripting for her for a client that she was working with. Of course, I said yes. But I continued for about 7 more years, just taking the occasional writing gig and working in corporate communications for a couple different companies. But in 2012, I decided to leave the corporate world behind and basically focus more of my attention on my own business. Since then, I've had a variety of clients: corporations, nonprofits, advertising marketing agencies, government, and a few small business clients. So what I do is help my clients with their communication strategy, web development, blogging, employee communications, social media, and occasionally PR, although that's not my main focus. Some of my recent clients have been Black & Veatch, Lockton, Select Quote, Westlake Ace Hardware, Children's Mercy Hospital, the Salvation Army, and several others. My 2 clients right now are the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I've been on a 3-day-a-week contract there for almost a year now. I edit lengthy economic reports written by PhDs and researchers. And I'll tell you, I frequently grab my dictionary because I don't know what they're talking about. But my job is to try to make their language as clear as I can without destroying the meaning. It's definitely a challenge. My other client right now is Brinks, you know, the armored truck people. I'm working with them on posts for their blog, and it's a little bit more creative and I don't want to say more fun, but it's just entirely different from what I do with the USDA. So if you're interested in starting your own writing editing business, here's a few tips I can give you. Number one, you need a background in writing. And I love that Cindy offered some great ways that if you don't have published work, you can start to do this. There are opportunities to get your work published because that will certainly help when clients say, let's see what you can do. And then you start to build your brand. You name your business, develop a logo, build a website, of course, get business cards, maybe a flyer highlighting some of your services and what you can offer to clients, and certainly a solid LinkedIn profile. I'm sure you're all aware of that and already have one. And remember to update your resume often because sometimes a potential client will actually ask to see your resume. So it's kind of like you're always interviewing for a job when you meet with a potential client. And I strongly recommend as you work on a logo to hire a professional designer. It's a world of difference from what a professional designer can do rather than just picking some cheesy clip art or something that's a standard template that maybe people have seen elsewhere. So that's an investment that's very worthwhile. You can actually build your own website quite easily. There is a number of companies that offer templates that you could customize, and it's a little investment, but it's very well worth it. And then you need a network, of course, to help you spread the word and get referrals. Something like the Purple Connection here is a great way to meet people, to talk to people about what you want to do, and to just really get out there and talk about your business and get your 30-second elevator speech ready for that. Then you need to decide whether to specialize or generalize. Some good specialty areas in Kansas City are healthcare, insurance, finance, engineering, human resources, and public relations. I have actually worked in all of those little niches, but I do not specialize. I am a generalist. I always enjoy a challenge of whatever's coming along. I feel I've had enough background in writing that I can learn new things, and I'm not afraid of getting into a new area I've never dealt with before. You need to decide a structure for your business and whether you need to form a corporation. I do not have a corporation. I am a DBA. The only legal thing I have is a checking account at my credit union so my clients can send their pay in by electronic payment. And it really is the only thing I've ever developed. I've never talked to a lawyer. My taxes are very simple. I keep my business just to me. I don't want to hire anyone. If work comes my way that is, I'm too busy with other stuff, then I turn it over to one of my colleagues. I've got many, many friends in the business, and some people are always looking for work. And at times I have been too, but right now I'm pretty busy. Anyway, the advantages of owning your own business, there's lots of variety. I've not been bored for 1 minute since I started my own business. You are your own boss to a certain extent. Of course, you have to take care of your clients, and they are kind of the boss for that project or that, terms that they have you for. But you can set your own hours. You can take time off without asking anyone. You can work whatever hours you want. I can work here in my lovely home office and not have to beat the traffic on the highway every day. I really love being my own boss to that extent. So really, you have the freedom to work as much or as little as you would like. It's a pretty low cost to get started. I did talk about the website and the logo. Those are two maybe out-of-pocket expenses, a few $100s here and there. Other than that, you have everything you need. Reliable phone, good internet, a printer, some paper. Very little out-of-pocket cost to get started. I have done no advertising at all for my business. All of my business has come through my referrals and through networking. The disadvantages are work does come and go. It doesn't matter how great you are, how much the client loves you. Things change. There's layoffs at the corporation. The contractors are the first to go. Or your beloved client quits to find a job somewhere else. The new person wants to hire their own team. I understand that. So it's never been a problem, though. You just find the next gig and move on. Advice, network as much as you can. In the chat after this, my presentation here, there will be some links. The Freelance Exchange of Kansas City, the International Association of Business Communicators have been a tremendous help to me. I've gotten probably 95% of my work through all the years through referrals through these organizations. You need to decide rates, of course, and whether deciding to charge by the hour or by the project. Sometimes the client decides that, but if it's up to you, just put that in writing beforehand. Make sure you have a signed contract with your client so there's never any question. And I also, I guess I'm always running out of time here. I want to close just real quickly with just be careful of websites that say, register here and get paid for writing. Some of those are a complete scam. Others will ask for money in advance. And even if they don't, you're competing around the world with people who will work for cheap, and don't do that. Charge rates that you deserve, and you'll get them. Good luck to everybody. I'll be around for the chat. Thank you.
All right. Great. Just a couple seconds over, not a big deal at all. So very good. So we are now in the Q&A period. And so we are in the portion of the event to where you can ask a question specific to one of our three panelists or a more general question. The theme of the day, as you have seen, is on writing. So if we can maximize these panelists and the community's expertise regarding writing and that theme of the day, then absolutely take advantage of the experts of the panel. But if there is something that you really need or want some support in, ask that general question, see if we have the subject matter expert on the call, or if someone on the call knows someone, then we can maybe refer you. So anybody have a question right now to ask? Okay, because I always have questions. All right, well, I will start off the questions then. My question, I'm not exactly sure which panelist is going to be most appropriate, but for a writer, someone who feels they're a pretty good writer, they do not want to own their own business or write their own book, but they want to be a contributor. So I know that Cindy is a contributor to a magazine, but what are some of the opportunities in writing, working for others as a writer?
Emma, can I respond to some of that?
Sure.
One of the things I would suggest, during the time in the Army, I've probably written about 200 professional articles, written a lot of letters to the editor. That's a good place to start. You'll find out it's not as easy to get published as you think it is. That's one. But when you do, I mean, it's really a boost, but it also gives you an idea. If you read letters to the editor, it's a very easy way to get published early on and to determine what is your particular skill set. What is it you're trying to convey? And then do a lot of, and I think it was mentioned earlier, do a lot of reading in the areas of your interest so that you're well-rounded in the knowledge that you have. Keep it short and pithy, because if you don't, if you're going to sit down and write the magnum opus, it's going to kill you as far as the amount of time you're going to put into it. Nobody will read it. So,
all right. Good. So sending requests to publications that you already read yourself. Okay. Good idea. Another question from the community. Anyone?
Hey, Emma, this is Jim.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be for anyone, but I think Bob, you might be well versed to answer this question. So writing. So I've been in the military for many, many years. I too was in Europe when the wall was up. I was a young private at that time, but and now I'm back. I'm getting ready to retire here. Coming out of the Army University there, Fort Leavenworth, and I'm pretty well versed at the Army writing style: active voice, short and sweet, bottom line up front. Is that the civilian writing style? That's going to be one of my biggest concerns. Not only transitioning to the civilian workforce,
Right.
if that's the path I choose to go, but just, you know, the civilian lingo, if you will. So that's one of my biggest concerns. I've been a soldier my entire adult life, 53 years old. And now I'm going to step into the civilian workforce. My wife tells me I'm going to be a terrible civilian, but part of that transition will be to be able to write non-military, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. First of all, I'd kill to be 53 again. So congratulations. There is a different writing style, and it'll have to be accommodated to whatever business that you're in. Businesses are like the military services. There are several branches of the military services. They do things differently. Companies do things differently. The problem we have in the military is we have a tendency to PowerPoint everything, make bullet slide, bullet points and stuff like that. That's not the way you write in the private sector. You got to write meaningful narratives, and you got to keep it focused on the objective. I was on several contract teams, proposal writing teams, where we would write 300-400 page proposals for $60 million contract. That's not an individual enterprise. It's 12 people spending 30 days sitting down and knocking out these giant proposals. That's not the kind of writing. If you're writing a book, read good literature. It'll give you an idea of the tempo and the writing style and those sorts of things, and try to emulate that from good writers, and it will really help you to be focused. And always, always, always get a good quality editor to read your stuff, because no matter how good you think you are, you're not. You will make mistakes and somebody else will catch. You know what you want to say, you think you said it, but a good editor will help you out in grammar and punctuation and even the meaning of it, or some of the terms that you use. Critical to get a good editor.
I might add, this is Cindy, I might add that you need to stop using your military acronyms, because no one will know what you're talking about. And it's so easy for us as military people to fall back into that habit of using acronyms. But, the other thing would be is to decide the area of writing that you want to go into. And I think that will help you determine how you want to write. If I was writing, a mystery, a military mystery or a military thriller, I would probably want to write in short and sweet sentences that are very active, lots of great verbs, and drop the ly words. We don't like those in writing. And, you might fit perfect into that genre of writing. But if you're writing, and even if you were writing in corporate for like a newsletter, they want their sentences short and sweet and to the point as well, because a lot of times people don't have time to dissect a sentence that goes on and on and on forever. So I think really the thing would be to decide what type of writing you want to go into, and then go from there. But I definitely agree with Bob. An editor is worth so much to have in your corner helping you. And I would be very particular about who I would choose to be able to do that. And I think part of your networking can help you with that. Maybe going through the writer's place, you might be able to find someone. But I think Ellen was talking about the fact there are people out there that will just take your money and take advantage out there. And I'm sorry, Elaine. And so you have to be very careful about avoiding those folks too.
Something I'd like to share as far as your concerns for writing in corporate America. In my executive MBA program, one of the very first courses that I took was on managerial communication. And something that was interesting was that the military style of writing actually was very helpful, because it is short, it is active voice, it is bottom line up front. And when you're in a manager role, you want it to be clear and concise and succinct. So that will be very advantageous. But where it might not be is where your emotional intelligence needs to come into. You need to not be a robot. You need to have some feeling. And that's where the narrative writing comes in a little bit. So it's a little bit of a balance. And something that if you didn't already know, Microsoft Word has a tool that is a reviewer. It will read your document, and then it'll give you kind of like a score on certain metrics. So it'll count the number of words. So if you're getting a little too verbose and you want to kind of keep it down to 500 words, it can count your words and help you kind of see where you're at with the count. It can also tell you how complicated the language is that you are using. It gives it a numerical value, and the higher that value is, the higher your education is supposed to be able to understand it. So if you have like something that's rated a 16, then that's like graduate level reading. And if you have people on your team who, if it's kind of supposed to be for a general audience, if the score is up in that upper teens, then it's too complicated as far as the language, and you need to shorten the sentences, use different vocabulary, and it's a really good tool to kind of see where your language might be. And if you understand who your audience is, that will help also.
There's another free tool out there that you can use called Grammarly.com, and you can download that, and it will actually review your piece for grammar and punctuation. And it does not as much as what Emma was talking about for Microsoft, but it will give you an overall grade for how you're conveying. Are you confident? Are you, kind or whatever, and it will give you a ranking of how your writing stands. Another tool that's inside of Microsoft that I really like is, and I think it's called Narrator, and it will read your writing back to you and talk about a great way to hear mistakes, because you just keep on reading over them and believing that that's the right way that something should be written. And when you hear it read back to you, it is just so awakening to see, oh my God, that sentence is terrible. And then you'll go back and rewrite it. And that's free inside of Microsoft as well.
Additional questions?
There it is. Hi, Jim, George Sluke. What I find is that it's a big hurdle to think of writing. And for transitioning military to civilian life, I like to think of it in terms of connecting. And what I do is find a common denominator, which in this case is the military, primarily through LinkedIn and their messaging opportunity. You could go out and do a simple search on LinkedIn for military veterans in your geographic area. As they pop up and you see things in common with them, you connect with them as a peer-to-peer in the military. That is a great door opener. And what happens is you're really messaging rather than writing. And you'll allow writing to come later when you fill out the resumes and you fill out the about on LinkedIn, because you're gaining connections and confidence. And what you'll find is you can connect somebody else within LinkedIn, and then there's payback on that as they connect you to some, and so on. So that's my recommendation from what I've seen today.
Yeah, thank you for all those responses. Very helpful.
All right. I know from the chat that we have at least one other actively serving individual who's getting ready to separate. Something that I would like to just kind of put out there for comment and from the community. Communicating maybe not in narrative or in articles, but in your resume. Okay. This is a written document. And this also requires some skill in understanding your audience and what your message is that you're wanting to communicate. Our transitions tips speaker is coming up probably in the next 3 minutes as we wrap up the Q&A. He will probably have a few things to say about resume writing, but anyone from the panel want to speak to that type of writing?
Let me jump in again because it's in my mind. What you find is if you go in LinkedIn and you pay some attention to a good about you section, that's a building block for your resume. Plus everything else in LinkedIn can fit into the resume format. LinkedIn, for my money, is the #1 credibility check by everybody online. If they don't have a LinkedIn profile, I wonder why.
Emma?
Hey, one other thing to add to that. So I just retired from Harley Davidson in June of 20 as chief engineer, and I've reviewed, I've got to say, at least thousands of resumes, and a lot of companies target military personnel, especially junior military personnel that are separating, that are in the like captain range because they have leadership and all of that. And I'm going to tell you, I've had some real rough resumes come across from military folks because they haven't translated all of that awesome leadership experience into civilian language. Civilians have no clue what companies are, battalions, divisions, motor pool officer, supply officer, arms, nothing. They don't understand any of that. And when I tell you I've reviewed thousands, this isn't because I necessarily needed that many people for the roles that I was looking for within my group. It was because we only had a handful of military people at Harley, and I became the military resume translator. That's not a good, I mean, it was great for Harley. They'd send me these and say, we don't know what this means. Can you tell me? Was the guy a leader? Was he not a leader? Does she have the level of experience we need or not? Is there project management in here? And then I would have to spend time going through that. And then oftentimes that was whether they even got a call, like whether they even get to the interview. So on this whole topic, and I don't want to steal the next guy's thunder, but really put a lot of time in making sure you're speaking civilian language. And if you don't know civilian language, get with someone who's been in the business world for a while, like myself or other people. There's lots of them around, but have somebody help you.
All right.
Gotta jump
Very
in.
good.
That is exactly what I do. I work for Veterans Upward Bound. And even though the entire organization is to help people go back to school, I'm the one person that actually got this little side gig thanks to the VA here in Leavenworth, and I'm an employment specialist. So I will help you write your resume, the interview skills and all that, and it's all free. So that's what I do, even though the program is to help you with school, because granted, obviously, if you get your degree or a certification or a license or whatever, that'll help you get a better job. That's what Veterans Upward Bound does. But I get to help with the after part. So if you need help with the resume, I can help you translate it.
Okay, very good. So we now know who in the community to go to, and we're going to move on to our last presenter. So to teach us the transition tips today, we have Gary Bloomfield, who is a Vietnam veteran and a published author of several compilation books. Today, he's going to talk to us about his work and offer some tips on how to better communicate to employers in your resume, as well as how sharing or writing your story can help in healing or transition from the service. Gary is going to just be audio for us today because his computer also has a dysfunctional camera. Gary, are you on the call? I hope he's on the call. Huh. Okay. Well, he was emailing me earlier this afternoon about calling in. Not sure if he did.
There is a
Okay.
caller, but they're muted and I don't know how to unmute them. So
Oh, well, shoot. Okay.
you might be trying to dial back in now.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure the one phone number that I didn't recognize was him. But now just to get him to start talking to us. We haven't had this happen before. Okay. Well, we may not get a chance to hear from Gary then. He did send me his notes, so I know a little bit about what he was going to say. Well, if we don't have him come on in the next few minutes, then I guess we won't have his transition tips other than what I can share. Gary, like I said, is a Vietnam vet, and this is a book cover of his most recent book. And it's about stories from men and women who served in our military in the health professions. And so the one I'll always remember is stories from these health professionals from our military where there was a patient or a person that they encountered while in service that they will always remember. It could be someone that might have been a wounded soldier or wounded warrior. It might have been someone just that they worked with or something to this effect. But it's a compilation book of caring for America's wounded warriors. And Gary has compiled multiple books like this. He's actually done one for women veterans that has not yet been published. I contributed to that one. About 5 years ago was when he asked me to support that project. And in these compilations, the stories can be humorous, they could be cathartic, they can be a variety of different things. And this is one of the reasons why I chose him to be the transition tip speaker.
I
Because
think he's logged in.
is he?
Yep.
Are you there?
Yeah, I got cut off.
Oh, there you are. Good. I was just sharing just a little bit, just based on the notes you sent me. Well, now that you are on, let's go ahead and get you going with your transition tips.
Okay. Good afternoon, all. I was a photojournalist and a video cameraman with the U.S. Army News team, traveling all over Europe, including former Warsaw Pact countries, to cover military events, writing stories and taking photos for magazines and newspapers, and shooting videos for network news shows. But a family emergency ended all that abruptly, and I had to return home to Kansas City and ask for a compassionate discharge to care for my ailing parents. So one day I had a great job, and a month later I'm a discharged soldier, totally unprepared for the transition. I decided to go to school on the GI Bill, and I got my bachelor's and my master's in the 4 years combined. And by then I was prepared to find a job. But if I'd had to do that when I was discharged, it would have been a momentous task, because I simply wasn't prepared. So now, for those of you getting ready to transition to civilian life, hopefully you've been planning on this move more than I did. You need to position yourself to be competitive in any job you feel qualified for. And you need to take this process seriously, because many others are also applying for those same jobs. And just like you, they also feel they are more qualified, they are the most qualified for the job. Unfortunately for you, there will be some already working at the company you're interested in, and they have an inside edge, because their work habits are known, and they've got a network of coworkers lobbying on their behalf for the same job you're interested in. Your task then is to prove that you are in fact the most qualified candidate, and you need to clearly communicate that in language they'll understand. There are two basic types of resumes: chronological or most important qualifications listed first. No matter how impressive your accomplishments are, most hiring officials will not take the time to read page after page of your resume. They simply want to know that you are qualified for the vacancy they have. Many veterans read job descriptions and feel they're qualified, So they drop off, mail, or email their resume, confident that they're locked for the job. But you need to take the time with each job announcement, determine what the qualifications are, what the requirements of the job entail, then tailor your resume for that specific job. Another job announcement might be similar, but the requirements may vary. So adjust your resume accordingly so that your very first paragraph addresses their most important need. Subsequent paragraphs highlight your qualifications for the job. Point is, don't simply shotgun your one resume to everyone and anyone. Do your research and tailor your resume for each vacancy. Yes, it does take more time, but it'll improve your chances of getting a call for an interview. On LinkedIn, I get requests every week to connect. I read every profile, and I'm always amazed at the poor spelling and grammar in so many profiles, which are like an extended resume. And for active duty and former military, they fall into the trap of using military terminology and acronyms that mean nothing to potential civilian employees. The only time this is acceptable is if you're applying for a government civilian job in the same occupation as your MOS, where those same terms and acronyms will be familiar. I hear constantly from combat arms veterans who gripe that their MOS does not have a civilian equivalent, and so they're at a disadvantage when applying for jobs. What they're ignoring, though, are those intangible skills they've learned while in the military. Teamwork, or working well with others, is a vital skill. Motivation and leadership are second nature to military veterans, and timeliness, being on time for work, is a constant headache for civilian supervisors dealing with workers who show up late, take extended lunches and smoke breaks, and can't wait to leave at the end of each day. Military veterans are used to getting the job done no matter how long it takes. Loyalty is another given for us. You can't imagine how often someone will just call off work because they're hungover or they simply don't feel like going in. Some don't even bother to call in. They just don't show up. That's unthinkable to service members. Flexibility or filling in as needed is another no-brainer for service members, and supervisors value someone who doesn't gripe that it's not their job. All of these intangible skills need to be included on a resume. Just to emphasize again, eliminate all military terms and acronyms from your resume, LinkedIn profile, and other job websites. Carefully read every job announcement you're interested in and tailor your resume to each job. That does not mean you have to completely write your resume from scratch for every job. You should be able to highlight and drag paragraphs as needed, possibly adding a sentence or two to address that specific job announcement. I kind of chimed back in as Emma was explaining the written part of it, but I'll just start back in. I'll be echoing some of the points already discussed. The book cover you're looking at is a compilation of stories written by military medical personnel, all of them remembering one very special patient. I reached out to more than 1,800 contacts, and for those who did take the time to write, they said it was a struggle, sometimes painful to recall, to reopen old wounds. This guilt is called compassion fatigue, and some handle it better than others. But they also said it was therapeutic to express those feelings, almost like letting go of emotional baggage they've been carrying for years. Another book in the series, which is finished, is about women in the military, mostly from Iraq and Afghanistan. And Emma did contribute a story for the book. Her story is about the challenges she had to overcome to be a badass airborne paratrooper. Many of the stories were about coping with life in a war zone, of being the only female among hundreds of men. Others who wrote for this book struggled because their stories were about sexual harassment and trauma. Again, for those who did write about this controversial subject, I worked with them for weeks, sometimes months, to get their stories exactly the way they wanted it. Some didn't want to use their name, but they still wanted to tell their story. And again, for those who did write, afterward they said it was cathartic, like finally healing old wounds. A few wrote stories, but then asked me not to use them for the book, which is okay, but still they felt better about writing something they couldn't share with anyone else. The third book in this series will be Alive Day Stories from Iraq and Afghanistan. It's about 75% done, and I'm still looking for stories, but nothing immediate, since I've got other projects to do first. And the fourth book will be about Vietnam vets. As already mentioned earlier, there are many veterans writing projects available today, including Kansas City's Public Library. I subscribe to The War Horse, which features many great stories, mostly from Iraq and Afghanistan. Veterans Voice here in Kansas City is for veterans being treated at VA hospitals. The National Archives is compiling stories, and the National Women's Memorial is recording audio stories and compiling written stories from female vets and active duty servicewomen. Many local American Legion and VFW posts are compiling stories, and not just from their members, but all veterans from their local community, creating a living library of military history. But on a more personal level, writing your stories can have a positive impact on your emotional well-being. I've seen it happen to so many others who've written stories for my books. Even if you just write it for yourself or for your family, documenting your story is a living legacy of your military experiences, and it can have a positive influence. The more these stories are written and shared with others, the better understanding there'll be for the military and for the sacrifices we make. And with that, I'll give it back to Emma.
All right. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you, Gary, for your transition tips, and to each of our panelists for informing and educating us. Also to those in the community who supported the discussions in the Q&A. So next slide. So if you're interested in continuing to participate in more intentional and facilitated conversations like those that were introduced today, I invite you to consider becoming an American Warrior at the ACA Business Club. Becoming an American Warrior affords you with many benefits of being a member of the club. You have access to any of the club facilities in the metro and where we have facilities in other parts of the country. And we currently have 3 club facilities in Kansas City, with 2 more expected to launch by the end of the year. You have access to over 20 interest groups as a member of the club, where American Warriors is but one. You have the option to join a business development team, which is like a small accountability group to support you in your growth, and whether that's personal or for your business. You have access to all of the club's events, as well as the members wherever they are through the directory. There are many opportunities for live as well as virtual networking and learning every single week. And there's leadership opportunities for teams, groups, or club locations, depending on your propensity to want to step up into leadership. So the Purple Connection and the Strengths Profile workshops occur every month, and these are sponsored, organized, and facilitated by my company, Tubes Consulting. American Warriors are always encouraged to attend and invite guests to participate as often as they can in these workshops, as well as the discussion group, which is the 4th Thursday of each month. This is attended in person or virtually and is open to American Warriors as well as their guests. And then the executive committee and club committees have routine meetings each month as well. Next slide. So for future events, next week is the American Warriors discussion group. This is always the 4th Thursday of the month, 2 to 3 p.m. This month's topic of the day is going to be on culture. We'll talk a little bit about teams, jargon, behavior, systems, and processes as part of the facilitated discussion. The Intro to Strengths Profile workshop is always the first Thursday of the month, 1:30 to 3. These are all Central Time. The first 30 minutes of the workshop is just to get introduced to the strengths profile. How is it different than other strength assessments? And then for those who want to actually take it, the remainder of the workshop is the workshop where you take the survey and then get an immediate result of an intro report, which I would then overview as far as the meaning of what the 10 pages are, and then offer some what's next options for how you might use your results in further growth. The Purple Connection is always the 3rd Thursday of the month. This is the event that you're attending right now. So next month's lineup, I'll give you a preview. Thursday, July 15th, our military spouse entrepreneur is going to be Trisha Walker. She's a military spouse and the president and CEO of 180 Elite Cleaning. Our military support nonprofit speaker is Sean Moore, also a military spouse. She is the executive director of Caregivers on the Home Front. Our military-friendly company representative is going to be Sherry McCants. She is a regional director elite for Canaway CBD. And our transition tip speaker will be Gary Walker, U.S. Air Force retired. And as you can kind of tell, the theme of the day for next month's program is when a family member becomes a caregiver. Next slide. You can always contact me for any information, questions on anything that was offered or discussed in the program, any type of referral connections to our panelists or folks in the audience if you didn't catch something. And in a few weeks, I'm going to be sending out an invitation for TPC referrals, which is an opportunity to intentionally connect with me and 3 other members of the community in a Zoom call of 3 to 4 people. All right, next slide. Last slide. So thank you, everyone. Have a very good evening. Follow up with each other, and you can expect to get the cleaned up chat channel in an email tomorrow, and the recorded event will be hung up, and we will share the link to that by early next week. So thank you, everyone, for being here. We look forward to seeing you at a future event. Have a good evening.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Emma. You guys take care.
All right. Bye.